Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for another installment of our Climate Change Solutions Frontline Perspective from Around the Globe webinar series. For those of you joining us for the first time today, welcome, and for those who have joined us before, welcome back. My name is Erin Gill, and I'm a graduate research assistant at the Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy, and I'll be your host for today. The Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy, along with our partners at the World Resources Institute and Environmental Defense Fund, are very excited to continue our series with today's presentation by Dr. Paulo Moutinho. Dr. Moutinho joins us today from Brazil to discuss the key issues and potential solutions surrounding deforestation in the Amazon and the implications for climate policy. He adds his presentation to those of past speakers from Canada, Russia, the United States, and many others in our series, and continues our conversation about the climate policy perspectives of top emitting countries around the world. I do have just a few housekeeping notes before I introduce Dr. Moutinho. First, please note that we will leave time for a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. However, because of the large number of people participating, we ask that you submit your questions in writing using the chat feature on the right-hand side of the WebEx screen. You can send in questions at any time, send them in to the host, and we over here at the Law and Policy Center will compile them and select as many as possible to convey to Dr. Moutinho. Note that when you send a question, please feel free to include your name and affiliation and where you're joining us from so we can provide that information to the group. And also, please note that we will be recording this presentation, both the audio as well as the slides, so you can access that at a later time. So, without much further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Paulo Moutinho. Dr. Moutinho is calling in today from Brasilia, the federal district in Brazil, where he is the executive director of the Amazon Environmental Research Institute, also known as IPAM. IPAM is a not-for-profit research, policy, and outreach organization that works to achieve sustainable development in the Amazon region. Dr. Moutinho has worked in the Amazon for over 15 years, conducting studies relating to the dynamics of deforestation and its effects on biodiversity, climate, and inhabitants of the region. Dr. Moutinho is an active participant in the UNFCCC's International Climate Change Discussion, and he has authored dozens of articles and books relating to Amazon deforestation and climate change. He is a co-author of the Compensated Reduction of Deforestation concept, which pleads for international financial compensation to developing countries that make efforts to reduce deforestation. This concept provides a basis for the development of the REDD+ mechanism, one topic that Paulo will cover this afternoon. Paulo, welcome. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our audience, and thank you for lending your valuable insight, experience, and expertise to our series. With that, I'll now hand the mic over to you.
Thank you very much, Erin.
Hi, Paulo. We're having a little bit trouble hearing you. Maybe the connection is bad?
Like
Please stand by, folks. We're having trouble, it sounds like, with Paulo's audio. Paulo, it sounds like your audio is just a little bit slow. Are you having internet connection problems? Stand by, folks. We had Paulo a moment ago, so I think he's just having internet connection problems from Brazil.
Yeah, I think that I'm back. Still live.
You are back. Perfect. Okay.
Okay, let's try again.
Continue your presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Jonathan, for this help with the web stuff. So thank you all for this opportunity. I would like to today this presentation present some cause of deforestation and talk a little bit about what Brazil is doing to face deforestation and about the threats related to Brazilian achievements to reduce the forest loss in the Amazon region. So, and I would like to conclude my presentation talking a little bit about what still needs to be done to take the Amazon deforestation to zero. By the way, I would like to start my presentation saying a famous phrase, yes, we can. We can the end of Amazon deforestation. And I would like to demonstrating some thoughts on how to do that. This is a big challenge, but it's possible. So on my presentation, I would like to relate it to all deforestation in terms of emissions. Of course, we have a lot of a huge biodiversity losses related to deforestation around the world, but for this particular presentation, I would like to see deforestation as emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions, okay? And in this second slide, you can see how the Brazilian emissions profile is totally inverted when you compare with US or Europe. So in US and Europe, the most part of emissions of carbon is coming from energy sector. In Brazil, you have the 60% in 2010, for example, coming from land use change, particularly deforestation, and particularly in the Amazon region. So this brings to us a challenge to deal with deforestation, but at the same time means or represents an opportunity to reduce or to contribute with climate change mitigation, reducing deforestation in the region. So we can, you can see, this is not working like a PowerPoint, but anyway, we can use that. You can see in this picture the Amazon basin. In yellow or orange, you have a deforestation over the last 20 years. And you have the famous arc of deforestation. I don't know if you can see my mouse point, but there is an arc of deforestation, as you can see, particularly in Brazil. I hope that you can see the border of Brazil on this map. But this represents one Texas deforested over the last 2 decades, only in Brazilian Amazon, representing a huge amount of emissions over this period. And there are a lot of causes or drivers of deforestation. You have cattle ranching activities or crop plantations like soybeans, smallholders activities, logging, and more recently, all demand for biofuel could pressure the Amazon region for more land to produce ethanol or biodiesel. So, but even these days, 70% of deforestation can be explained by cattle ranching activities. So extensive pasture has been the most part of deforestation is because the people is converting forest to pasture in using it in a extensive way. But there are a lot of other drivers, but the most important drivers that we have over the last years or decades, it's the infrastructure investments plans. So as you can see here, over time you have plans and more plans to invest, to make huge investments in the infrastructure. And now our government has the Growth Acceleration Plan. This is a huge investment of infrastructure, particularly in the Amazon, in dams and roads, in the other kind of infrastructure to integrate the Amazon region to the rest of Brazil. The most part of the most problem related to investment in terms of infrastructure is road, but not road per se, but paved road. So in the Amazon, all the deforestation is concentrated in each side of roads. 70% or 80% of deforestation is concentrated along the roads, especially paved roads. You can see the effect of the roads on this map. This is Rondônia state, and the deforestation in yellow. And 97, you have a deforestation like that, and 2011 deforestation like that. So it's a huge effect on roads and paved roads and deforestation. One big challenger is how to disconnect the roads from deforestation. Everyone likes to use roads, paved roads, when be in the Amazon, but we need to find a way to break this link between roads and deforestation. In terms of investment, the government, historically the government is working to provide more investment to infrastructure. The idea behind that is because the government believes that it's fundamental to integrate it, as I said, the Amazon to the rest of country and explore more the resources of the region. And you can see here, in terms of millions of reais in 2010, from 2000 to 2010, the investment in transportation, for example, including roads, and the investment on environment. So we need, if we want to face the deforestation in the region, change this kind of pattern of investment. And the infrastructure investment, it's huge. It's making it in a large scale, like we have with PAC, the Growth Acceleration Plan in the Amazon, roads and terminal in rivers and the dams. But all this effort is integrated to other efforts in terms of infrastructure that has been planned to South America, like it's an initiative to integrate all the South America in terms of infrastructure. But if we have, the future like the past in terms of the relation between infrastructure and the relation between infrastructure and deforestation, in terms of the business as usual scenarios, we have, I have one big, a little problem here. I was expecting a dynamic map here demonstrating how would be the deforestation in 2050. This was a paper published in Nature and led by Britaldo Soares Filhos, the Minas Gerais University. But we cannot see this dynamic on this map working right now. But I could say that by 2050, a large portion of deforestation, a large portion of forests will be deforested. If we have the same pattern that we had in the past running in the future in terms of investment in infrastructure. Everyone's, as you all know, there is a growing demand for commodities around the world. So especially because you have the new nations like or developing nations like China is demanding more and more commodities, and there is a huge pressure on Amazon forest and now to make available more land for agriculture. So you can see in this slide the predictions in terms of expansion of production in Brazil. For example, for corn, you have blue arrows indicating corn, soy, and sugarcane. The yellow bar represents the production in 2007, and expectation, the green bar, by 2018. So the people expecting to produce more, but and in this particular paper, the author saying that we need to expand the production by 2018 like that. We need to make available more 15 million hectares for production, for crop production. So, but in terms of investment, the large part of investment, the large part of agricultural credit, it's to a traditional agriculture, those that is not related to any kind of safeguards or any kind of worry in terms of sustainability. You have now, in terms of agriculture plan of Brazilian government, one investment of 70 billion US dollars. And if you compare with some kind of a new initiatives that we have now to invest in a low carbon agriculture, you have almost $3 billion for those agriculture that are concerning in terms of emissions. So we need to invert this kind of investment or pattern of investment. Recently, we have more. One important driver is the settlements. So here in this map, you can see all the settlements of the Brazilian government in the Brazilian Amazon, and the red one is those that you have at least 80% of the settlement area deforested. So this is a new driver of deforestation, and we need to deal with this new pattern of deforestation. So you can see in more detail this new pattern of deforestation. For example, from 2005 to 2010, increase the proportion of, in terms of, take a look on the blue bars, increase the proportion of small size of deforested areas. So this is not means necessarily that a smallholder is provoking that, but there is indicated that you have a participation of smallholders and the settlers in a deforestation process. So in 2002, for example, 30% area is smaller than 50 hectares, and now more than 70% it's smaller than 50 hectares. So we changed the pattern of deforestation in terms of the size of deforested area. Summarizing the threats of Brazilian achievements to reduce Amazon deforestation, because as you know, we are reducing a lot since 2004 our deforestation rates. I will talk a little bit more later about that. But there are at least 4 threats. The Brazilian government growth acceleration plan, for example, there is no environmental safeguards for this huge plan of investment. There is, as I said, a growing demand for commodities around the world, and the settlement policy right now can cause a significant part of current deforestation. And of course, one thing that everyone knows about that it's a changing in our environmental legislation. So there is a huge lobby to make our legislation, environmental legislation, more flexible, and this has caused a huge effect in terms of planning to expand agriculture, or even to in terms of giving a signal to the society that you can be forgiving to any kind of deforestation that was provoked in the past illegally. So this is a bad signal for our society, and now our Congress is debating the changing on a forest code specifically. So the Brazilian Amazon represents a huge carbon stock. So we need to keep this in our minds. So this represents a huge opportunity to keeping this forest standing. We are contributing a lot for climate change mitigation. So in Brazil, maybe now talking about the good side of deforestation in terms of mitigation. Brazil has been done a lot about how to face deforestation in the Amazon region and how to deal with that. So one thing mentioned by Erin at the beginning of presentation, it's the compensated reduction of deforestation. This was a very important concept supported by Brazilian government on that time in 2003 and later in 2005 by Marina Silva, our Minister of Environment on that time. And it was the basis for creating the Amazon Fund. The Amazon Fund, as you all know, it's the most important RED experiment around the world. So we are operating in a way that you could compensate those that make effort to reduce deforestation. This is fundamental because not just law enforcement, not just a good process to monitoring deforestation, or even a good legislation. All this stuff is not enough to save the Amazon forest. We need to bring value for standing forests, and maybe the Amazon Fund open a window for that. As I said, one good indicator that Brazil is doing well in terms of reduction of deforestation is the reduction in deforestation rates particularly since 2004. And you can see that here, for example, here in the Y axis, you have the rate of deforestation in square kilometer, and the brown bar represents the deforestation from 2000 to 2010. And you can see here how the deforestation rate has been reduced over time since 2005. Another paper, leader also to Britaldo Soares Filho and me and others colleagues, we could explain between 2006 to 2009, 2004 to 2006, that 40%, around 40% of this decrease in deforestation rates could be explained by the international prices of commodities, but a very important proportion of this reduction can be explained by protected areas that were created, and particularly in 2004. And a part of this process in terms of reduction in rates is related to law enforcement that increased a lot over the last years. So there are other factors, as you can see, but the big question related to that is it's sustainable, this reduction. So the big decision or the big things that happened in Brazil over the last three years was our Brazilian climate change policy. That for the first time established targets for emission in a national scale in a plan, and it was voted into law. So in these plans, as a target, the Brazilian government now needs to reduce 80% of deforestation in the Amazon region. So this is a very important step because 5 years ago would be impossible to talk about targets to Amazon deforestation. If we could reach this target, 80% of reduction in deforestation by 2020, around 5.5 billion tons of CO2 will be avoided in terms of emissions to the atmosphere. So this is a huge contribution of Brazil in terms of climate change. So in Brazil has been done more like a climate change fund. This is a part of a national policy, a national climate change policy. Sorry, it's in euro, but anyway, this is a strong. Well, the climate change fund. It's a strong tools to allocate it more research in terms of best practices to reduce emissions from different sectors in Brazil. So the climate change fund has now 100 million euros per year. The other program, it's the ABC program. It's agriculture of low carbon. So it's allocating almost 3 billion reais or 1.2 billion euros to reduce emissions from agriculture sector in 2011, 2012. There is a growing opportunity, like as a roundtable for soy, roundtable for sugarcane and beef. So a growing opportunity with the marketplace to exclude the foresters from the supply chains. And as I said, the creation of a protected area, specifically in 2004, was a huge step to reduce deforestation in the following years. Here you can see in this map the carbon stock in this case in indigenous land. The green, the lighter green, it's other kind of protected area, but the brown and the orange and the yellow are indigenous land. So this is very important. I would like to show that to you guys because at least 30% of carbon stock in the Brazilian Amazon is on the hands of indigenous people and the traditional communities. So those that are playing as guardians of forests. So they are very important stakeholders doing a huge effort to protect forests. So those need more investment to continue to do what they are doing. But in terms of investment by the Brazilian government, it's very low. Just to have an idea, you have less than $1 per hectare per square kilometer. $1 per hectare per year in terms of investment in indigenous people land. So it's a very, very low investments if you compare with those investments in terms of agriculture. Here you can see how the indigenous land or a protected area create a barrier against deforestation. So this is a Xingu Park, indigenous Xingu Park in Mato Grosso and Pará states, and here you have a deforestation until 2005. So they have the indigenous land play a huge role in terms of deforestation reduction. Again, in our scenarios projects, if the presence of indigenous land can reduce the emissions for the future, in this case, the Xingu Park, the same park that I mentioned before, can avoid emission in terms in the future, and by 2050, for example, around 500 million tons of carbon by 2050. So the other thing is very important in Brazil, happening now in Brazil, to face deforestation, to face emission from deforestation is what the state is doing, the Amazon states. Some states now have their own target to reduce deforestation. And it's very important because the RED mechanisms, it's the best way to engage those states in a program to reduce deforestation, because means there's some kind of compensation for the effort to reduce deforestation in a state scale. So, but it's one thing very important that I would like to mention here. It's what kind of RED system that we want to Amazon. So right now we have a lot of RED projects. So I'm calling this chicken pox RED system. So every project working under different assumptions, working on different accountability of carbon, and having different approach in terms of stakeholders. So we needed to integrate all these projects in one system that could operate in the national scale with some subnational scale. So one thing to do that is that what we are calling RED jurisdictional. So one thing that we could operate in the national level and to have a subnational programs, in particularly the states, that could contribute with the national targets. So this is one thing that we need to do, and Brazil is totally ready to do that. The Brazilian government is working on a national RED regime that could operate it and create rules to integrate all the efforts to compensate those doing effort to reduce deforestation. But we need some kind of, like, it's one representation that I mentioned before. The one, it's a netted approach for RED. You have in the first box the RED national regime with a little box inside the big box. You have a subnational regime, and in the new subnational box you have a small box that could be programs or RED projects. This is exactly what we are trying to do or establish in Brazil. The state is totally involved with that. This is Acre, for example. It's the most important state with advanced program in terms of RED, in terms of payment for environmental service related to forest and the forest sector. So it's possible to have soon in Brazil each state with your program operating totally allocated in a national regime. That's the dream for that. Avoiding this approach project by project. So again, that's graph, so figure demonstrating the amount of carbon CO2 that would be avoided by 2020 if we reduce 80% of deforestation. And we could use that, for example, these 5.7 billion tons of CO2 avoided could be distributed as a, how can I say, I could say a RED certification for states. That's the right side of this figure. and even to do as a credit to other projects related to the Brazilian government programs. So I'm not going in detail on that. I hope that you can see more detail in this publication. This publication is very important for us in Brazil, so you can see more detail about this model to distribute the benefits coming from RED among the states in the Amazon and among governmental, the national governmental programs. So, but all the details you can download that from our website and get more detail about the model that I mentioned before. But what still needs to be done? So to take the Amazon deforestation to zero, so it's a lot of things to do. That's the big problem. But we did a lot, but we did more, particularly because we have those 4 threats coming, operating right now. So to face that threat, we need to consolidate the Amazon state RED programs. So it's very important for the national regime if each state operated integrated to a federal government, operating integrated to a national regime. So we are doing a lot about that, but we need to consolidate that. So there is some kind of opportunities right now in Brazil to establish a national trading emissions system. So this could create some kind of a new initiative to bring benefits from RED and from some kind of trading emissions system. Like, for example, the industrial states in the south operating integrated with states in the north, in the Amazon, in a way that can working together and reach the target established by the national policy for climate change. Those ABC programs, the program for agriculture of low carbon, needs to be expanded. The protect area needs to be expanded in the Amazon. At least there is at least around 10 million hectares in Amazon forest that could be allocated as a protect area. This is a very, very important thing to do. So our sense that there is no more area to establish protect area in Amazon, but this is not true. So there are a huge area still available to protect area or for national forests or concession for wood, things like that. So and there are other things to do, and like, for example, bring safeguards for our investments plan in terms of infrastructure. So and the last one is related to the driver, the most important driver of deforestation, the cattle ranching. So we need to intensify the cattle ranching activity. So just to finishing the presentation, we have some good opportunity, a huge opportunity like that. So there are a lot of public forests. This is not a protected forest yet, but this is a public forest that could be allocated. It's around 30 million hectares. Part of this protect area is state land, other is a federal land. But there is a huge area that could be protected as a protect area, as a park, as a biological reserve, or national forest. And there is now some kind of conditions to reconciliate agriculture with forest conservation. One thing that I mentioned, and I mention now again, it's a cattle ranch intensification. This is a very, very important. If we intensify the cattle ranch in the Amazon from 1.1 head per hectare to 1.5, we could release a huge amount, more than a huge amount of land, deforested land, to agriculture. So cattle ranch intensification is very, very important. The other approach is related to smallholders. As I said, the settlements is very, very important driver now, provoking deforestation. But we need now in Brazil, in the Amazon, some kind of a new approach for a regional low-carbon development. We are establishing a red consortium of municipalities, of counties, to deal with deforestation as a consortium, to bring together some different municipalities to working together and deal with deforestation process in a particular region. This is a totally new approach that has been developed in the Amazon. Other thing that I mentioned before, it's totally new, this is a potential for emission trading system in Brazil. As you know, we have, for example, California operating with Acre and other states in Brazil to create an emission trading system. But we could have the same inside Brazil, between, for example, the Amazon states, as I said, and industrial states like in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And for me, the most important thing is its education. So these two kids will be 46 or 45 in 2050. So we need to bring education as a strong action, as a mechanism that needs to be integrated in any kind of effort to reduce the climate change problems, to reduce the consequence of climate change. Without education, I think that will be impossible, pass all this dream that I tried to demonstrate with this presentation, that's possible conciliating production, conciliating infrastructure with forest conservation. So we deserve that for the next generation. So thank you all. Forgive me for my poor English, but I hope that everyone enjoyed this presentation, and I am open for questions right now. Thank you very much.
We have a lot of questions coming in, so we're going to try to get to as many as possible, but please bear with us since we've got such a great collection, and we probably...
How long do we have for?
We've got about 20 minutes, so we'll have time for enough. So one question that came in that I think is very interesting is from Rick Love, and he asked whether individual Amazon states pass their own law on deforestation, and asks if they do, is it possible that a mix of laws and policies will ultimately be in effect? And I guess to add on that, on my own side, do you find that sort of discouragement is going to cause problems? Yep. We can hear you, Paulo.
Erin?
Yes, Paulo. Hi.
Yeah, no, not very well. So I think that you could write, please.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I think other folks can hear you too. But we'll put the question in writing for you, and you can see it that way.
Erin?
Hang in there, folks. I think we're having a little bit more audio trouble, but we're getting Paulo the first question so he can answer that. And in the meantime, please continue. I guess, like I said, we've got a lot, but we're welcome to sort of find the ones that folks can, be sort of general interest and things like that. So we're gonna Paulo and see what he has to say. Paulo, can you hear me now? I guess not. Hang in there, folks.
Yeah, I can hear you, but there is echo behind your voice.
Okay.
So if you write, it would be great.
Yes, we're going to put the question in the chat panel for you. So just hang on since typing it. And folks on the line, thanks again for your questions, and just stand by. Paula, that should be in your inbox now, or your chat panel. Did you see the question, Paula, from Ruth Love?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let me see.
So, again, I'll repeat it.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for okay. Yeah, I got it. I got the question. Yeah, well, there is. I think that this is the same for every country, and you have the state law or state laws establishing some kind of rules for some things. In this case, deforestation. But when you have a federal law, this federal law in some aspects can replace the state law. So it's possible, that's the big deal. I think that it's possible to combine what the state is doing in terms of legislation for RED with the planning of federal government is doing in terms of a national regime or the rules to regulate this regime. So it's totally possible to do that. And we could mix, as it's mentioned by yeah, I didn't get his name, but by our fellow.
Great, thank you, Paulo. Is my sound any better for you now? I guess not. All right.
Yeah, yeah, I can. If it's not strong to you, continuing to use the chat would be nice to me, because I can get exactly what people are asking for.
Great. So we will put in another question.
So.
And then we'll
yeah, I got it.
And that should be coming in soon. This one comes from Hans Foster, and he asks, net deforestation could also be brought to zero by increasing afforestation and forest restoration efforts. Of course.
Okay, but I think before, Erin?
Yes.
Okay, before this question, we had other previous questions from Oswaldo Carvalho, I think. So let me answer the first question, and now the question from the Haynes, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
So the question is, if intensification of cattle production is the main way to decrease deforestation, what has been done by the government and by the private sector? So this is a very, very important question. I feel that we need to do a lot in terms of policy to intensify the cattle ranching. The cattle production in the Amazon. So we have some effort in terms of, for example, the roundtables of beef, or effort for some groups of producers in the Amazon trying to implement best practices in their lands to avoid consequence in terms of deforestation. For example, there are the idea in terms of certification, some registry of best practices in the Amazon that put together some big producer of beef, so to operate it in a sustainable way. But I think that we need to do more. So we need more in terms of policy coming from the government. So And one thing is investment. One thing is it's reduce the investments in terms of cattle ranching or in an extensive way, and provide more credits to cattle ranching, the cattle intensification. So I am saying that because Brazil has this huge contradiction in terms of macro policy. At the same time that you have people from the government investing in a way to reduce deforestation, the other side, the other part of the government, it's trying to invest in more in cattle ranching in an extensive way. So we need some kind of a reconciliation in terms of macro policy to bring some kind of result for a cattle ranching activity in terms of its impact on deforestation. Yeah, the other question is about deforestation and afforestation or reforestation. Yeah, you're right. So we have a large areas, particularly in a riparian zone, so the forest along the rivers. We need a huge area available for forest recovery. And this is a very important biodiversity site, even for a carbon sequestration by the forest growth. But one thing that's very important to mention here is that avoiding deforestation is much more cheaper than planting trees. So we need to do the both, but we don't need. It's not necessary, to have a large area deforested to start forest recovery. So we need to combine the forest conservation in terms of the native forest, in terms of Amazon forest, and at the same time that you promote the forest recovery in those areas already deforested.
Great, thank you, Paulo. We sent you another question. This one is from Ainsley Smith with Amazon Watch in DC.
Yeah,
he notes that under the new forest code, there's expected to be a 47% increase by 2020 in deforestation that she notes is disheartening. And so she was wondering if you could speak about the new forest code and how that plays into your work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very difficult to say scientifically that the change in the forest code will increase a lot deforestation in the Amazon region. So there are a lot of possibilities to, the changing that they are planning, the congressman is planning now could bring more deforestation, but we are still working on that scientifically. So because that is very hard to affirm that the forest code changing will provoke more deforestation in the future. I believe that will be the chance for that is very high, but it's not easy to affirm that. But one thing that I could say about forest code, it's in terms of signal to the society. When you say that for those that conscientiously provoked illegal deforestation in the Amazon, now is forgiven, so you have an amnesty. So this is a bad signal, because you are saying for the next generation of deforesters that, okay, I can't continue deforest because some change in the legislation in the future can forgive me for what I did in terms of deforestation in the past. So for me, it is my particular opinion about that, not necessarily the opinion of my institution, but my opinion is that this is a moral situation. So it's a bad signal. The other thing is about the force code. It's that the force code, the change in legislation. It's to solve the problem created in the past, but they are not dealing with what to do in the future. For example, there is a possibility if you consolidate it and legalize all the opened area or the forest area in the Amazon, changing the legislation, it is not means that we sorry, I'm confused a little bit with my words here. But the idea is that the forest code, the changing, solves the problems created in the past, but is not dealing well what kind of some type of problem that we could have in the future. For example, if you go to if you deforest in over the next 2 or 3 years, the forest code as has been proposed by the Congress could legalize that deforestation made over the next years. So because that we could, there is some kind of a way using the legislation has been proposed by the Congress to legalize other deforestation in the future. This is a big challenge in how to avoid that. So I think that we have another.
Yeah, we do. I'll let you read that. But for the group, what this is talking about is the idea that forests provide a variety of different ecosystem services, and Tatiana Alves asked whether there are mechanisms in place to prevent people from paying twice for the same service through compensating legal reserves.
Oh yeah.
Area. So Paulo, I think, is going to address that. Thanks.
Yeah, this is a very important question, because I said that we cannot continue to work in a project-by-project approach for RED and even for projects related to payment for environmental service. So because that we need a high-scale regime operating or regulating this kind of new mechanism to bring economy, to bring investment for environment. So because that we are put a lot of effort to saying that it's important for any kind of program for payment for environmental service or even HED, that we need a national approach, and in a national approach where each subnational program could fit in this national program in a way that you could be sure that you are avoiding a double accounting, for example, or paying twice for the same service. So it's very difficult to do that if you have a project-by-project approach, because, as I said, each approach has their assumption, each approach has the accountability for carbon, for example, or for debt service. So we need to integrate all if you have some kind of efficiency in terms of climate change mitigation.
We have time for one more question. We're going to send it to you over chat, but it involves the differences between RED and RED Plus. And Vomik Shah asks whether Brazil's focus is limited only to RED or also RED Plus or both, and how would the RED plus to be applicable in Brazil's conditions versus just the red?
If there is a country in the world prepared to establish a red program in a national scale, this country is Brazil. As I said, there are a lot of threats in terms of threatening our progress in terms of the deforestation reduction. But we have fundamentals elements in our hands, as I demonstrated during my presentation, that could be used to establish a red regime in a national scale. So, as I said, so the national policy establishing targets, some learning experiences coming from Amazon Fund. The states in the Amazon, it's totally engaged on this in this discussion, and we have the government, the national government, working on that. But there is one additional threat for all this stuff related to REDD+. So it's money. So the money is not coming to those that are promoting initiative related to REDD+. So this is crucial. For example, the states in the Amazon, in the particularly Acre states, they are establishing different state institution to deal with a REDD program or the payment for environmental services program at the state level. But politically, there is a high cost because there is no, how can I say, some good signal that the money will become soon to compensate this effort. So we have a delicate moment now related to REDD in Brazil. So we did a lot, but we cannot see compensation yet for this effort. So this is a situation that we have now in Brazil.
Great, thank you. I know there's still so many questions left unanswered, but we are now past our 1 o'clock time limit, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But Paulo, thank you. This has been a really great discussion, and thank you to everyone who joined, as well as those who sent questions. This has been great, and it's great to see interest in this topic. In case you'd like to revisit this discussion, we will be uploading today's presentation and the audio online after the event, and you'll get an email with the link to this recording. So, on behalf of the Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy and our partners, the World Resources Institute and Environmental Defense Fund, thank you very again to Dr. Paulo Boutino and to all of our attendees. Paulo, this has been wonderful, and we're really thrilled that you were able to add to this contribution and this conversation. We will be in touch with all of you soon with more information about the next events in our webinar series, and we hope that you will all join us again. So with that, we're going to end the presentation, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, everybody. I can provide answers by email if you all want to talk a little bit more about this issue. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Hi, Paula. We're having a little bit trouble hearing you. Maybe the connection is bad?
Like to
Please stand by, folks. We're having trouble, it sounds like, with Paulo's audio. Paulo, it sounds like your audio is just a little bit slow. Are you having internet connection problems? Stand by, folks. We had Paulo a moment ago, so I think he's just having internet connection problems from Brazil.
Yeah, I think that I'm back. Still live.
You are back. Perfect. Okay.
Okay, let's try again.
Continue your presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Jonathan, for this help with the web stuff. So thank you all for this opportunity. I would like to today this presentation present some cause of deforestation and talk a little bit about what Brazil is doing to face deforestation and about the threats related to Brazilian achievements to reduce the forest loss in the Amazon region. So,
hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us for another installment of our Climate Change Solutions Frontline Perspective from Around the Globe webinar series. For those of you joining us for the first time today, welcome, and for those who have joined us before, welcome back. My name is Erin Gill, and I'm a graduate research assistant at the Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy, and I'll be your host for today. The Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy, along with our partners at the World Resources Institute and Environmental Defense Fund, are very excited to continue our series with today's presentation by Dr. Paulo Mutino. Dr. Mutino joins us today from Brazil to discuss the key issues and potential solutions surrounding deforestation in the Amazon and the implications for climate policy. He adds his presentation to those of past speakers from Canada, Russia, the United States, and many others in our series, and continues our conversation about the climate policy perspectives of top emitting countries around the world. I do have just a few housekeeping notes before I introduce Dr. Mutino. First, please note that we will leave time for a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. However, because of the large number of people participating, we ask that you submit your questions in writing using the chat feature on the right-hand side of the WebEx screen. You can send in questions at any time, send them in to the host, and we over here at the Law and Policy Center will compile them and select as many as possible to convey to Dr. Mutino. Note that when you send a question, please feel free to include your name and affiliation and where you're joining us from so we can provide that information to the group. And also please note that we will be recording this presentation, both the audio as well as the slides, so you can access that at a later time. So without much further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Paulo Mutino. Dr. Mutino is calling in today from Brasilia, the federal district in Brazil, where he is the executive director of the Amazon Environmental Research Institute, also known as IPAM. IPAM is a not-for-profit research, policy, and outreach organization that works to achieve sustainable development in the Amazon region. Dr. Mutino has worked in the Amazon for over 15 years, conducting studies relating to the dynamics of deforestation and its effects on biodiversity, climate, and inhabitants of the region. Dr. Mutino is an active participant in the UNFCCC's International Climate Change Discussion, and he has authored dozens of articles and books relating to Amazon deforestation and climate change. He is a co-author of the Compensated Reduction of Deforestation concept, which pleads for international financial compensation to developing countries that make efforts to reduce deforestation. This concept provides a basis for the development of the REDD+ mechanism, one topic that Paulo will cover this afternoon. Paulo, welcome. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our audience, and thank you for lending your valuable insight, experience, and expertise to our series. With that, I'll now hand the mic over to you.
thank you very much, Erin. Bring to us a challenge to deal with deforestation, but at the same time means or represents an opportunity to reduce or to contribute with climate change mitigation, reducing deforestation in the region. So we can, you can see, this is not working like a PowerPoint, but anyway, we can use that. You can see in this picture the Amazon basin. In yellow or orange, you have a deforestation over the last 20 years. And you have the famous arc of deforestation. I don't know if you can see my mouse point, but there is an arc of deforestation, as you can see, particularly in Brazil. I hope that you can see the border of Brazil on this map. But this represents one Texas deforested over the last 2 decades, only in Brazilian Amazon, representing a huge amount of emissions over this period. And there are a lot of causes or drivers of deforestation. You have cattle ranching activities or crop plantations like soybeans, smallholders activities, logging, and more recently, all demand for bio. And I would like to conclude my presentation talking a little bit about what still needs to be done to take the Amazon deforestation to zero. By the way, I would like to start my presentation saying a famous phrase, yes, we can. We can the end of Amazon deforestation. And I would like to demonstrating some thoughts on how to do that. This is a big challenge, but it's possible. So on my presentation, I would like to relate it to all deforestation in terms of emissions. Of course, we have a lot of a huge biodiversity losses related to deforestation around the world. But for this particular presentation, I would like to see deforestation as emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. And in this second slide, you can see how the Brazilian emissions profile is totally inverted when you compare with US or Europe. So in US and in Europe, the most part of emissions of carbon is coming from energy sector. In Brazil, you have the 60% in 2010, for example, coming from land use change, particularly deforestation, and particularly in the Amazon region. So this